I just want to do God's will.
What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robison, and Easter is coming. In case you don't know, I'm sure you know that. Easter is coming, and I had a question for you. Is Easter a literal story from the Bible? Is it just sort of a poetic description of some things that may or may not have happened? Is it pure fiction? Where are you at on that? I mean, you guys are a Christian audience. I know where you're at on most of it, but I think it's fair to push, the boundaries of our knowledge, to ask the tough questions. And that's one thing that today's guest has done. He's been on before. I've enjoyed it. Rick Larson was a lawyer for many years, a professor for many years. He comes from a background of, you prove it. If you believe it, prove it, and then we'll call it true, right? And so he, after God graduated him from the universities and from the work world, he decided, I think I'll investigate a few more things, and he's investigated Easter. So he's got a couple of documentaries that are now bound into one DVD, for those of you who still have a DVD player. I do, called Heaven and Earth, and those comprise a couple different things. One of them is called the Christ Quake, and the other is called The Star of Bethlehem, which are available on some streaming services, and we'll tell you how you can watch those. But I find the whole process interesting, and so I love this whole investigative documentary kind of thing. So, Rick, it's great to have you back on Life Today Live. Appreciate you being here.
Fun to be here, actually. A lot of fun.
All right. Well, why is this fun? Because I know you enjoy what you do and what you present, but tell people why it's fun for you.
Well, it's fun, in part, Randy, because of who you are, because you are interested in what I do and what I'm. You're right. Being a lawyer, what turns me on is being able to show that something is so. Let me say early on, I don't think Christians need to have concrete evidences, to have a deep and vibrant faith. I just don't. But Paul is the guy who says over and over, as he writes, if this stuff's not true, we're pitiful. So Christianity is a fact-based religion / belief system. And so for that reason, I'm not afraid of science even slightly. I mean, it's we learn in Scripture that God is truth. And since science is a methodology designed to lead people to truth, how can I be afraid of science? So wherever I see the gospel stories impact or impinge on, the natural order, that makes me think, well, we can check that. We can go see, is the evidence on the ground, to the extent we can find it today, consistent with what we see in Scripture. And that's the story behind the two videos that have become the double film, Heaven and Earth.
I want to hit that real quick, because on the science side of things, because I think you'll get this. I talked to a scientist recently, and she's like astrophysicist or something, and heads up BioLogos, right? These are scientists, like fully accredited, legit scientists. And one thing that I asked her about, and she confirmed for me, is that science, by necessity, limits itself to testing the natural things. And so when we start talking about Easter, resurrection, that is not a natural thing. It is a supernatural thing, above nature, what that really means. And so I think when you talk about Christianity and science, I think science is only at odds with spiritual things when science becomes not just a means to discover things that are true, but truth itself, because it is self-limiting.
Becomes a faith itself. It becomes a faith.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. But if you understand that science can uncover truth that points us to the ultimate truth that is bigger than science, I think you're on the right path. And that's exactly what you've done. Tell people a little bit about what you've done as you've dug into the earth to find truth.
Yeah, that was really kind of exciting. What happened is the first film, the Star film, went crazy. And it became the #1 bestseller on Amazon. And everybody was asking, what are you going to do next, Rick? What are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And my response is really, well, I don't dream up things to do. I mean, I feel as though in my prayer life and in my Christian life, if God tells me to do something, that's what I do. And he wasn't saying to do anything except make sure a star gets out there. So that's what I did. But finally, I started thinking, well, what did I do in Star that stimulated people so much? And I decided that it was taking scripture seriously, dead seriously, and scraping it, so to speak, for evidences, and then going to look in the real world and to see do we see things that are consistent with what the stories tell? So I thought, well, how would you do that? Because Star told me that there was a celestial poem in the sky that ended at the cross. I wondered, can I go find evidences for the cross? And obviously it's near impossible you just don't expect to find anything like, for example, a fragment of the cross, because it's wood. Yeah. You understand the issues. Sure. But Matthew does describe this quake. And so I began to think, well, I wonder, could there possibly be any evidence of the quake that Matthew says happened while Jesus was hanging on the cross? And I figured, of course not. Of course not. I mean, it's 2,000 years ago. Human beings live there. They'll walk on top of, whatever. I mean, it's all going to be gone. And seismographs have only been around for, 100, not even 25 years yet. No way to check to see if a quake occurred. And then as I began to study, I realized, oh my goodness, God pulled a fast one. He set it up so that we can find out today that something happened back then. And his seismograph that's been sitting there quietly for thousands of years is called the Dead Sea. And the Dead Sea, it is dead. It's dead because of its salt content, no life in it. So let me tell you why that's relevant. First of all, it's maybe it's 15 miles-ish from Golgotha, and it sits there with no fish and no plant life, so the water is still. And so when seasonal rains, annual rains, make their way to the lowest place on Earth, they've got to flow down there. The dust from those infusions of water settles gently, like dust in a still room, and it makes layers. And the geophysicists call those varves. And there's one per year, sometimes two per year, summer and winter. And it turns out, because there are no fish or life or anything that disturbs those waters, they just layer up as smooth as they can be, like sheets of paper. I think of it as this huge database. And when I learned about this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, well, I wonder if the quake at the cross is reflected in this huge seismograph set up from before our time in history. So I went looking. And lo and behold, those varves and the annual granularity is just completely stunning for something like this. It doesn't happen all over the world. It happens at the Dead Sea. And so you have an annual record, and the problem becomes, well, how do I count? Because you have to have a reference here.
Right.
Right. So, and that turns out that's provided also. Good old Josephus, that many of your viewers will know by name even. Flavius Josephus wrote histories, basically contemporary of Christ. Yeah. And he wrote about a battle, the Battle of Actium. And he tells that the Battle of Actium occurred, it was a sea battle, but nevertheless, it was a famous battle that everybody knows about. And the quake occurred during that battle that was so severe that Josephus says it killed tens of thousands of people in Judea. Now remember, this is not a time when they have skyscrapers or something like that. So we're talking about a major quake. So the way you can find a reference point in the Dead Sea records from which to count is to find that quake. You find the Actium quake, and then you can count. And knock me down with a feather, not really. I almost expected it would be so, but if you count the years, you find, oh my goodness, sure enough, just as Matthew records, in 33 AD, as Jesus is hanging on the cross, we have a record of that quake right there in the strata of the Dead Sea. They're called varves, but they're strata. Yeah. They're pages of a database, and it's right there for you to see.
So what do you cut down like sideways through a section of this, which is going back through the layers over the years, and so that you can see the lines, and literally, if everything's calm, it's just lines. But if there's an earthquake,
Yep.
obviously there's that disruption. Is it so many?
It's exactly correct.
It's like a picture, right?
It's like a picture. When I first started investigating it, I had no idea how to do this because I'm not a geophysicist. That's the thing. When you're called to do these things, just like astronomy, I had to learn a lot. So when I first went just to see, is there something here that I can share with people? I was thinking I might have to pull up a core, coring instruments, or I might have to, I don't know. I had a lot of ideas that turned out to be unnecessary. Here's what happened. The Dead Sea is receding. It's receding because the Jordan River is being largely consumed upstream. Yeah. And so the Dead Sea is drying up, to tell you the truth. So what was the floor of the Dead Sea in past years, in fact, back when I first visited, when I was a kid, it has dried, many tens of feet since then. And it's exposed the walls of the Dead Sea, which were beneath the sea, and are now, you can walk up to them. And so that's what's in the film, is I go down with, the major experts, Israeli experts in geophysics and the Dead Sea, and I walk with them down there, and we go and we find the strata, and we see that there was indeed a quake in 33 AD.
And
it's amazing.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. And that is available in the film Christquake, and the website is christquake.com, and I'm putting it on the screen for you right there, as well as in the chat. And what will people see? Which, by the way, I mentioned the DVD earlier. I still have a DVD player. I don't think it's hooked up because everybody's streaming.
Mine's not hooked up either.
Right? Yeah, I know, right? Everybody's streaming these days, and you got it on some streaming services. So tell people how they can watch this.
It should be, both Quake and Star should be available on most major streaming platforms. I'm always amazed that people watch so much on their video game consoles and things like that. Yeah. It's available pretty widely. I mean, the intent is to put it everywhere. Whether that gets pulled off or not is always hit or miss, and may change from even month to month. But it's supposed to be in all places. So if you check your favorite service and it's not there, check next door to the next service, because it'll be there.
Yeah.
I want to talk briefly about the name of the pair of them, the two movies together, because this is something that I did not plan. So I make Star.
The Bethlehem Star of Bethlehem.
I'm sorry, Star. Yes, I'm sorry. Forgive me. And I don't knock it out of the park. God knocks it out of the park. It becomes a #1 bestseller on Amazon. Fabulous. Okay, and I finally, years and years later, I make the Christquake. It wasn't until I put the two DVDs on my desk. Before they were streaming, they were just DVDs, and I put them on my desk and I said, "Oh my gosh, it's the same story." That's the end of the poem that begins in the Star. Mm-hmm. Christquake is the end. Mm-hmm. And immediately pops to my mind one of the primary names of God the Father. Jesus calls him the Lord of heaven and earth. And I realized God has chosen to disclose to us the scientific basis for his name. He is the Lord of heaven, Star Bethlehem, and earth, the quake at the cross. Stunning. So that's why I had to name, the twin set, heaven and earth. I had to do that. And so even though DVDs may be growing out of fashion for sure, both those films are available for people to look at online.
You mentioned that you're not a scientist, right? You're a lawyer by training, by trade, and then a professor of law for years, which as a documentary filmmaker is actually better than being the scientist, because you're the
I would have to say yes.
Right. You're asking all the hard questions. You're pressing people to prove their case. So you go to the scientists and make them prove their case. What do scientists say about this, and especially about your conclusions?
Well, I never forced the issue for the Israeli scientists who were helping me because I didn't know their faith status and I thought it would be just rude as crazy. So all I did is just talk with them about just the facts. That's all, not conclusion. The years is all we talked about. And I never talked about, well, you understand that that's when Jesus was on the cross. I think they quite clearly did, but it wasn't appropriate for me to get in and punch him in the face, like we do at the Oscars these days.
Right.
So, we talked around it more than to it. But yes, you're right. It's better to be an outsider in a sense than a scientist, because a scientist's expertise is very narrow. Because today we are so well advanced in all of the sciences that people have a stack of knowledge, a column of knowledge. Some people call it a silo. That's very deep, and people understand it very, very well, but they understand less outside their own silos.
Right.
Whereas a person like me, a generalist, who is interested in knowledge in general, and because I'm a lawyer and I'm good at research and all that stuff, I'm a relatively quick study, and I can ask the questions outside the silo and see how it fits together. Yeah. And that's what I've done in these two films. And it's been astonishing to find out. I mean, everybody uses that word. I wish I'd never used it before. It's astonishing to me the extent to which the evidence on the ground in the sky perfectly matches what Matthew tells us in his gospel. Whoever suspected, because he's the one that tells the miraculous stuff. He's the one that says there was a star before as Christ was born. He's the one that says there was an earthquake at the cross. And some people dismiss his gospel because he says those miraculous things. And it turns out those are the ones you can prove. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think in fairness, a lot of Jewish writing and certain parts of the Bible are very poetic in nature, are very symbolic in nature. And they just...
If they're intended to be poets, they're poetry.
Right. So when you find something that is literal, there is a little bit of, oh, wow, that part was literal, because, you talk about a star or shaking of the earth, those things.
That's what I thought.
Right?
That's what I thought. Yeah, it sounds like bad fiction, right?
Oh, I wouldn't call it bad fiction. I wouldn't call it bad fiction.
Come on. Somebody gets killed and there's an earthquake? Really? Anyway, to me, that's bad fiction, but...
Okay, you're displaying something that I think is actually healthy in the context of doing these investigative type documentaries, which is a healthy skepticism.
Well, let me tell you why that is. I taught at the university level for many years. Do you want to stand up in front of an audience of thousands that includes a bunch of university professors and make an idiot of yourself? You got to stand up there. It doesn't work to get up there and do a little tap dance when you haven't got it figured out. You got to tell the story, and it has to be so. Likewise, when you stand up in front of a jury, it's the same. You don't get to stand up and make things up, because the other side will shoot holes in everything you've said. Yeah. So you have to really take it seriously, work it all the way back, get all the way down to the bottom end, make sure all the back end is filled in and everything before you stand up. And that's what you do as a lawyer. And it's amazing to me that the writings in the New Testament stand up to that kind of rigorous analysis. They do.
Which tells you what?
It tells me that we can trust the story. The writer was not making things up. He was writing a record, not a story. He was writing something that wasn't just made to make you have a good dream or something. Hopefully, maybe people will, but he was telling you what happened. Just as Paul and Luke wrote most of Acts, as you know, he was writing very carefully what actually happened. There was a shipwreck here, and Matthew says there was an earthquake while Jesus was hanging on the cross. And here's what he said. He said, "Tetelestai," which means it is finished or is paid. Astonishing things. The fact that the earthquake really occurred, better to put it the way I would as a lawyer and or a scientist, the facts on the ground are consistent with what Matthew said. There's no one can say anything stronger than that at 2,000 years distance. But the fact that is consistent gives you grounds to think, well, Matthew said also what Jesus said on the cross is what he said on the cross. And also that when he said the tomb was empty, the tomb was empty. He's not making stuff up.
Yeah.
So happy Easter.
Have you found the tomb yet? I know there's a couple of places that claim to be.
Oh, that's the
tomb,
problem.
but...
That's the problem. There are too many. Here's the thing also. Here's the thing. I limit my research to stuff where the story clearly impinges on the natural order. So I can go look for the evidence that would result from actions within the natural order, the movement of stars, the movement of the earth, heaven and earth. With the tomb, unless someone was to tell me something that, that impinges upon the natural order in a way that can't be changed by men, I wouldn't know if I was standing at the tomb.
Right.
Let me give you another example. Just as this, you'll get a kick out of this. It's really kind of off point, but that's all right.
That's all right. Yeah.
Some people in the audience will certainly believe that Jesus is returning again. And some people were read enough of the Old Testament to know that where he puts his foot down on earth again is on the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives, you'll read in the Old Testament, is said to the valley that's going north-south, which is the direction of that portion of the geological record, splits instead east-west toward the Mediterranean. It opens up. Now, because the Great Rift Valley flows north-south, most of the action on the earthquakes there is north-south.
Okay.
And so I always wondered, well, how is it that the Earth splits the other way? So as I was looking at the geological maps for Quake, I get a hold of the Israeli Geological Survey maps and look at it, and lo and behold, right there through the Temple Mount, headed for the Mediterranean, is our deep east-west fault lines, which means, in other words, that it's set up to receive Christ's foot. Now, there's an example of where the natural order gives us some evidence that I can point to that say, okay, we're getting pretty close right here to where things are going to happen. I wish we had something like that for Doom, but I don't know of it.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask this, because Bible also says without faith it's impossible to please God. So
That's exactly right.
Right. So while you are looking at these things of the natural order, while you are proving things according to the scientific method, which only tests what can we touch and see and feel, measure what we can measure. Can you really get there without making that leap of faith?
I don't think so. Jesus said, it's really interesting. It's not a contest between them. They're complementary. But Jesus said, you don't need these hard facts that Rick Larson is proving. He said, blessed are you who believe without seeing. And then Paul comes with the other side of half of that equation, and he says, this is a fact-based religion. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, we're fools, and we should go get drunk. I mean, it's really fascinating. So no, that's how I began. Actually, we do not need such evidences to have a vibrant, living faith. Mm-hmm. But Christianity is a fact-based religion, and there's no shortage of fact in the natural order that supports our faith.
Yeah, you know what? You nailed it succinctly. They're not competing; they're complementary. And when you talk about the faith that you need, Jesus says, just like, see this little mustard seed? Just that little bit right there. So it's not incumbent upon us to come up with a whole lot. It's just have a little bit. Come on. And so I frankly,
the faith of a child.
The faith
of a child.
Yeah, yeah. Just that trusting, which Judy, come on, be nice. One of my viewers, she says, we'll always have a Thomas among us. I actually like Thomas, because Thomas wasn't there when Jesus showed up the first time, and all Thomas said was, I want to see it for myself. And all Jesus said was, come see. And Thomas said, Lord, I believe. So,
I've never thought of it before, but I guess I'm like Thomas. I want to see.
I want to see. Yeah.
I want to see. Yeah. And especially the stuff that sounds crazy. I want to go see. Really? Right. And then you go check that out, and when it proves out the Thomas part, well, just like for Thomas, it disappears. The
Yep.
faith, I mean, becomes just as like rocks now.
Yep.
I mean, because it's
Well,
there.
And in Thomas's defense, remember, he's the one that when Jesus wanted to go back to where they were trying to kill him, and Jesus said, "Well, I'm going," and they're like, "God, Lord, they're going to kill
Don't
you."
do that.
He's like,
Don't
"You
do
know
that.
what?
Yeah.
We're good." Well, Thomas said, "I'm going with you because I want to die with you." So don't tell me Thomas didn't have faith. By the way,
No.
the other 10 disciples, because Judas was already gone, the other 10 disciples didn't believe what Mary, when she came back, or Martha, which was
Right.
yeah, when she came back and said he's risen, they didn't believe either. They dismissed her as a woman. So come on, Thomas was not that. I think he gets a bad rap. That's a side point.
Yeah. I agree. No, I agree with that. I agree with that.
I think it's okay to say, Lord, will you show me? And then, boom.
I do too.
You get the Rick Larson
too.
documentaries where God goes, yeah, check this out. Not only will I show you, but this is cool, right?
Yeah, it is. And it also confirms my name of the Lord of heaven and earth. I mean, and I can't help it. People ask me, but I ask myself. They say, why now? I mean, why are we finding this stuff out now? I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, we're in end times, but people have said that for centuries. We may be. I don't know that, but I do know it's amazing that we living today have a resource where we can go and see our faith is not just a nail driven in midair, bam, bam, bam. Nope. It's driven in facts that we can verify.
Yep. And at the same time, by the way, second chapter of Acts, they say that they were living in the last days. So we can have that conversation later. But that's exactly at the same time that something very supernatural happened. And yet, when they spoke in tongues, they were speaking in languages that the people would understand, because the whole point of all this, heaven and earth, old covenant, new covenant, the whole point is Jesus Christ.
Yep.
That's the entire
Absolutely.
point. So that's where we want to point you guys today. Rick, I appreciate it. Is there anything I missed that you want to mention before I let you go? This has just been a fun conversation.
No, just have me back and we'll think of more things to talk about. You and I, it's easy, I mean, it's easy to talk, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have fun. We
Yeah.
have fun. So I got more for you.
Yeah,
Just don't know what it is.
If I'd gone to A&M and been a law student, you'd have been the professor I'd have hung out with after class just to
Oh
talk
yeah,
with,
I got along pretty well with the students.
I
They were
bet
good
you.
to me.
I bet you.
Professor of the year multiple times. So
Nice. All right. Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, Geiger Maggie's, and check out again the DVD if you got that, Heaven and Earth. The two documentaries you can look for, and I believe that they're both on Apple TV as well as Amazon Prime.
They are.
Okay.
They are.
So you can check those out, and it's the Christ Quake and the Star of Bethlehem. So
That's
you can
correct.
check out both of those, and
and also go to heavenandearthmovie.com and christquake.com to read more. The Star website, which is horrendously popular around the world, is called bethlehemstar.com. It's basically a short book that is very well appreciated. I can tell that because there's a map there. You'll see when you go look at the pages that people from around the world visit it. So
cool, man. I love it.
Yep.
I love it.
Yep.
And I appreciate you taking the time to do it, and all the effort you put into this, and for sharing it. What a great treat for Easter as well. So thanks, man.
My joy.
Appreciate you guys hanging out, listening. This is fun, and really you'll enjoy the films. So go find those, and then come back. We got more great inspiration for you right here every day, live. Working on the Facebook thing. I know that there's some issues with it. We'll get to that, but come back. We'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
Okay, am I clear?
On the vast, limitless sea of divine mercy.